Hey, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. We've got people just trickling in based on how Zoom brings folks in. So I think we've got most of everyone, and then they'll just jump in here over the next few minutes. But we are FIT. We are software for strength and conditioning coaches. My name is Landon. I am the president at FIT, and we've been running a webinar series this summer uh, focused on how a strength and conditioning coach at an institution could start their own side hustle based on their, vast experience and vast education. And so we're closing it up today with Joe Neal. Joe has been one of our clients at Fit for a matter of years at this point, and he runs a very successful operation. And let me just give a little bit of an overview on Joe, and then I'm just so excited to turn this over to him and have him teach us all of the things that he's learned. And it's really comes down to being a great coach, a great leader, and a great businessman. So that's a lot to bring together. So let me tell you about Joe. He has developed an extraordinary ability to design tailored training regimens for his clients so that they get the best results. And he's worked with Olympians, Major League Baseball players, professional boxers, race car drivers, NHL hockey players, and many more. And his expertise has made it easy for him to design training protocols for athletes at elite levels and all the way down to beginners who have never lifted a weight. And another aspect about Joe and his operations that I really admire and respect is he has built a really good relationship with his clients based on integrity and delivering excellence. But he has also created a really strong staff, a really strong culture where it's a very family atmosphere. And Joe really takes care of his employees regardless of who they are, where they come from, what their background is. It's a family kind of environment. And so I just love that. And so, Joe, with that quick introduction, I'll turn it over to you. What we'll do is run through your presentation, then we'll open it up for folks for Q&A. And so please take it away. We're so excited to have you here, Joe.
Thanks, Landon. No, I appreciate it. Yeah, so I was approached by Fit to basically provide some context on how to start, some sort of business and or, some sort of side gig to help drive income. A little bit about myself and our business here in just basically in Southeast Michigan. I've been operating 2SP Sports since 2007. So we're working on, 17, 16 years right now in the industry. I've been working with youth athletes, and while Landon's intro really was around, the clientele that I work with now, I mean, really, I started my whole business in the youth realm, and I started with 6, 7, 8-year-olds when I was in college. And, there was just at that time, 2001, 2002, there was just this amazing gap that doesn't seem to exist anymore in athletic development. So, or preparation, I should say. There wasn't a lot of people that were training children at the time. And that was a time where I saw kind of this opening in the market, and I started to, when I was home for the summer or I was in the winter in between, I was a baseball player professionally. I was a very marginal one. It's good enough to be there, not good enough to stay there. When I was home in the winter for 3, 4 years, I was building up clientele and starting to develop some processes. I've definitely an untraditional background when it comes to how these new coaches are coming up. They have schooling backgrounds. I mean, I had a background in school, but it certainly wasn't necessarily in kinesiology. I actually spent the first 5 or 6 years that I was really involved in this industry, traveling basically the world. I've been through Russia, I've been through Canada, I've been through Mexico, I've been through the United States, and we were looking for best practices, been, IMG and all the Carl Lewis and just all these different places to help build some knowledge around youth development. And we started applying those practices really, really early. And I was a one-man band for probably the first, 5, 6 years, trying to figure out what the niche was and how I was going to develop some of the things that I do now. And while it's been a good ride, I mean, it's an ever evolving business. And those are the things that I think the new coaches and even older coaches need to learn to adapt to. It's every day we get a new piece of technology. Every day we get there's a new fit that comes out every day. Every day there's a new thing on Instagram or Twitter. Everybody's sharing these different, you know, mainstream practices that they're utilizing to better their athletes, and it's a lot. I mean, Instagram didn't exist 15 years ago in the capacity that it does today. So I think there's just this knowledge overload that a lot of people are getting enamored with, and you got to learn how to sift it out. So like I said, my non-traditional background, I definitely didn't come up in the school, with the kinesiology degree. I learned a lot just on my own, trying to figure out what I thought was best for my clients and the demographic that I was working with. So, just some larger end clientele that I have. Every picture in here is somebody that we currently work with as our web, our marketing person was putting this together for us, or for today. We wanted to use actual real pictures of clients that we work with on a daily basis to give some good context of athletes that we've known and really are involved with. So I've been a big part of a lot of large contracts over the time. It's not really a brag point. It's more like these guys have spent a lot of time with me, 8, 10, 12. I've seen guys retire. It's a really cool part of being in the industry this long, is working with them when they're young, and then they turn 36, 37, and all of a sudden they're now getting ready to hang them up and live their life happily ever after. So as we get into the main part of the presentation today, Fit had presented me with several different questions, and I just wanted to build the context that we are. What I'm trying to do today is provide young coaches, or even coaches that are thinking about doing their, let's call it, go on their own, some idea of what it's going to take to do that. And I through my career, I mean, even as my own boss for the majority of my career, I'm literally just dealing with things on a daily basis and trying to find resolutions to problems on a regular basis. And when you go into this realm of leading yourself, that's you have to have a firm idea of where you're going to start and what you want to do. And so I think that's what this presentation is really about, moving through the next couple of slides. So the first question that we were presented was, what's the first question? How and where do you find new clients, and what are you looking for? And it's interesting because we have a very niche approach to what we're trying to find. Our demographic that we're looking for at 2SB Sports is a rotationally based athlete, somebody that's going to swing a stick, kick a ball. Those are the athletes that we're looking for, and we're generally looking for people that are 8 to 18 years old. Although we do train older populations, as long as they're still playing their sport. We don't necessarily train any fitness type people like myself. Like our company wouldn't train people like myself who have a job that come, they work their 8 hours and then they come home. Now, you can definitely set that demographic up also as we go, but I think a big part of what you want to do and how you want to focus is to know exactly who you want to deal with on a regular basis. So on here, to me, when I first started out, I was like, okay, I want to work with 8 to 18-year-olds. I want them to play some sort of sport on a regular basis and relatively high level. High level meaning like wherever they sit, they're not a casual participator on the weekend or something like that. They're training 6-7 months a year, and then they're going into their sports season at that point. I want to know, do I want to focus on a gender? We typically train females and males. Some people want to focus directly on one of those segments of the population. That's totally fine, but you want to know exactly which one you want to chase. And then, is there an age and that you want to go? Because I think we're going to train, from my experience, we're going to train somebody that's a little bit younger, very different than somebody that's a little bit older and that might have some training age to them. How would we go about um, attracting that demographic? And this is something I think we've done a really good job of over the time that we've been in business, is we are going to show people how we are going to improve their performance. Maybe that's through social media handles. I mean, that's something like social media is a necessary evil for our purposes. Like, it's not something I like being on a lot, but it is something that our demographic does appreciate and does watch and does listen to and does read. So we'll use our different handles and our different platforms to push out information that describes how we would exactly go about our process. And I think that's an important part for a lot of coaches, is that people want to know that that what you're doing. Okay. We don't do a ton of like brag posts within our company, meaning like, hey, we work with this guy, or we work with this guy or girl or whatever. It's more so content driven to show why we do something, when we do it, and how we do it. And I think that's a really important part to gaining some sort of popularity and people identifying that you do have best practices. One of the things that I commonly will do is short form type information, 30 seconds, a minute or less, to describe exactly that process, whatever that process might be. And a lot of people might think, well, that is giving away the secrets to what you're doing, but really people aren't going to duplicate it the way that you would actually implement that process. So I think it's important to understand that you can tell them anything, and you're still going to do it best because you understand it the best. So you're not giving away the secrets of it. You're showing people how you do it, and they will pay, like I said on here, for your expertise. What do you say to potential clients as they kind of go through the process with you? And I think this falls into the retention category. I think it's important to, as I put it, we tell our coaches all the time, you got to read the room. I mean, we have a staff of 17 full-time coaches within our facilities, and you got to read the room, and you got to know what they're looking for, and you got to ask questions, and you got to communicate, and you got to, like the first bullet point here says, you got to set clear expectations. What are we trying to get to? How are we getting there? What are we going to do to get there? And then execute that process. I think that comes with some, planning out the situation. Like, we'll never go into training an athlete without having some sort of assessment. And we'll talk about remote versus in-person programming, but typically, even in the remote process, we will send out, or we will not typically, we will always have an assessment. So we'll send out a assessment that's remote based, a YouTube copy. We want you to mimic these movements, at least so we have some semblance of how an athlete will move. And then we will attach their prescription or their exercise prescription to what we want them to do from a remote platform, or remote segment. If we are having an athlete in gym, we will do an in-person assessment. We won't train you without it. That's a key thing for us moving forward, to design an individualized program for our athletes. And even if you had a general population type client, I think it's important to get some semblance of what they can and cannot do prior to them starting with their program, because you could simply make one wrong move and all of a sudden that first session becomes a disaster. And that's not something that we're looking to do. We're looking for red flags, although we don't want to turn them into a science experiment. I think that's an important part not trying to overcomplicate the assessment process. But it's something that as we're moving through this, we want to look for general ideas that are going to hint us in a direction to go to at least have a starting spot for these clients to come in and work from. How do you keep clients and as you go through the process? I mean, our biggest thing for retention is uh, we want to drive results. We want to show them on a regular basis what we're doing and how it's improving their process and their performance. We utilize several different platforms within technology, so that makes it easy. We build that into our fit, and into our fit platform with results through our whiteboard and our testing processes. But we're constantly showing them how they're improving based on trends that they're going through. Now, it's important to, I think, first let them understand that not all results are linear. So we're not, on day one, we're not going to just automatically every time they come in and test, there's not automatically going to go straight up and that slope's going to be really sharp. We over time want to create a slope that is going to be improving, because sometimes we're going to have to add in qualities of training that are actually purposefully going to suppress their system in order to build a larger foundation for improvement over time. So, there are times where we want to speed somebody up. We always use, vertical jump as a key performance indicator that's going to show improvement. Now, do we really care if they're a basketball player or volleyball player, the inches would be as important? But some of the other sports that we deal with, the inches and improvement from a vertical standpoint aren't as important, and force production becomes something that's a lot more interesting to us, and how they apply force and how quickly they can do it is much more interesting. So now if it's done right, those underlying qualities and underlying metrics should add to their improvement in vertical in inches. But we always want to tell our athletes what the expectation is and what the results that we're looking for, and how those performance indicators might be affected over time. So if they have a clear understanding of that, they know what to expect, then they won't be caught off guard if there's some dips in performance at certain times based on how we're applying these things. The second big part of that is going to be adaptability and how we go through and create energy for our client. In our setup, we typically train athletes on a more, we'll call it like 1 to 5, 1 to 8. If we do team training, it could be 1 to 10, things like that. It's very important that we have high energy within the environment, and a lot of young coaches, like, they really don't understand that the client that comes in doesn't really care how your day is going. It's about their day. They're only there for an hour. They don't understand that you're in. I've watched a couple of these, and we've talked. I've heard people working 40, 50, 60, 80 hours. I mean, I work a long day. It's just kind of normal for me. And I am, my hobby is my job. So it's a little bit different for some people, but there are, if you're coming in and you're working a 40-hour week and you're having a rough day, your attitude and your energy could be affected by that. And it could kind of, rub off on your client poorly at times. So I think it's important that we really understand how how your look and how your attitude during a session is positioned. Now, I'm not saying that you gotta have a smiley face on the whole time, but it is important to be upbeat and kind of lead the way. We have our coaches, we're always trying to move them, that you have to move faster than the pace of your client if you want to improve your client's pace. If you move slower than the pace of your client, that's going to be a problem. So as long as we're constantly moving faster, it could be 1 gear above where they're at, their pace has to be pushed. And I think that leaves a positive effect on how that session's going to end up. And then, I think the last part of this is going to be always adding value. How an athlete perceives your input is a very important, and even in just a regular, let's just call it a client. It's very important how they perceive your input. Are you always trying to improve what they're thinking about as far as their process? I had an athlete this morning. We have a little bit of a neck position problem as a skater. He sleeps. We got him a different pillow to try. We got him a different sleeping position. I'm always trying to add value and inputs that I've called on from the history of what I've been doing to see if that can positively affect this athlete's outcome on a regular basis. So everything, and I tell all my coaches, one of the biggest things is this is just every bit of training is all practice. And then we just draw on those practice times for future times that we run into. The time that I run into the ACL, or the hundreds of times that I've run into an ACL problem and we're trying to rehab it. I'm going to draw on those athletes that were similar in how they presented their symptoms and things like that. And I'm going to use those experiences to help the outcome of the athlete that's now in front of me from 5, 10, 15 years ago. It doesn't matter. Those are the things that I think just keep practicing and practicing. And that's something that's going to add that value for that athlete when you come across something that's maybe unique. And every time I run into what I think is the last thing I'm ever going to run into, I get presented with a brand new circumstance that's new to learning. I think that's what makes this whole industry so interesting to me, is that I never seem to run into the last thing I'm ever going to run into. Things that are looking at from a programming remote standpoint, what are the biggest differences that we see on a regular basis? I wanted to kind of create a list and some of the things that we can control and some of the things that we can't control within those offerings. On the remote side, I've already listed five different things here, but on the remote side, I personally doing remote, I like it a lot less because I feel like I have much less control. Now it's you see a lot of things on social media platforms that are surrounding like all these giant, books of business and things like that. And while I think I've been in the business for a long time, generally those are super low cost. They're 20, 30 bucks, 30 bucks a month. And there's room in the world for that. Trust me. And people just want a general program to access and follow if they want a template like that. But in the remote world, if you want to get super finite like we would with our programming, and there's a lot less people that are looking for that, and a lot less accessibility for things like equipment. And there's a lot, there's a lot less ability to follow some of those things. There's so many check boxes that we got to make on the remote side. Does this person have access to a gym as long as you need them to? Do they have some of the exercise equipment that we need on a regular basis, the med balls and cable machines, and are you going to use a belt squat and things like that? I mean, there's some things that we have in our centers that don't exist in a lot of the places that our clients might go to on the road. So we have to account for that. So some of these blanket programs go right out the window if you at a minimum don't have the equipment that you need. And look, we can get a good workout anywhere in the world, whether you have equipment or not. But I think that expectation needs to be set also on what is defined as a good workout for that particular client. In person, we have much more control. We can handle all the variables. We're there. We can focus on what needs to be done 100%, make adjustments on the fly, which is something that remote, they might have to, we've asked athletes to send us video of particular scenarios. If they don't feel like they're getting into their hip or their whatever the scenario might be, they'll send videos of that to do that. But there's still going to be a delayed response time to them being able to send it and then us being able to apply the correction in that time. So they'll go through a whole segment without that. And that's something that you give up in remote, and in person, you can make that change right there. And then, you're going to have more equipment availability. And generally speaking, you're going to be able to get super narrow on what you're trying to accomplish on a regular basis through an in-person involvement like that. So programming for general pop and athletes in particular, as an athlete, I kind of naturally work towards athlete performance and improvement. I will tell you from experience and the few people that I've trained in the general pop world, I almost prefer it a little bit. And there's a couple different reasons why. Generally speaking, general pop type clientele have more accessibility throughout the year. So if you look at it from a business standpoint, they have more regularity. You're not going to have, 6 months off or, and I would say that overall, especially in the youth environment, we're starting to bridge the gap on how important in-season training is. So that's starting to close a little bit. So I don't want to deter people from the athlete side of that, because I do think that some sports are definitely embracing an in-season application since I've been doing it, and probably in the last 5 years, because of the accessibility to programs and things that are online. It's definitely driving up participation during the season, and we're going to see the result of that is going to be, less injury. And in our experience with a good program, you're going to have less injury. But in general, if you want to train in person, general pop type clients typically train more regularly year round. They take less time off. I think what you give up in that on the athlete side versus the general pop is you're going to go for more general goals. The general goals could be, hey, I want to look good without my shirt on. There's not a lot of performance value to that. It's going to be, nutrition, eating, sleeping, making sure that you have a program that kind of reflects, some of that muscular gain and things like that. If you have an older I like one of the really cool demographics that I like is the maturing population, people that are over like 60 or 65, because those people really, really need the help at this point. And that's something we've been looking to as a business, getting those people stronger. Something that we might dive into later. From an athlete perspective, it's a much more finite look at what an athlete needs. The days of an athlete, deadlifting 600 pounds and not getting them to the next level is gone, particularly in baseball, particularly in hockey, where we spend the majority of our time. Now we're looking at rotation, high speed revolutions, things that are going to directly affect their output immediately. And so these things require coaches to be up on what is the newest and the best, because the technology that is being provided to strength and conditioning coaches at the professional level, at the collegiate level, and now it's trickling into the private sector like us. And we've had technology for a very long time. So we've had force plates, we've had Proteus, we've had, VBT, we've had all we use smart system lasers from Vault, things like that. Those type of technologies really expose what you're doing on a regular basis. So if you're not improving your athlete's performance on a regular basis, you're almost exposing yourself to not getting better with these technologies that are now available. And they are very, very particular with that. So you have to continually refine your practices in order to make sure that your program is improving. Pricing model is always my favorite thing to talk about when it comes to business, and this will shock a lot of people. And early on in my career, and I've always been like this, I kind of want to be at the top end of the pricing model for any area that we're in. And sometimes it gets kind of depressing, because you might have an assessment and they might tell you, oh, we just can't afford it, and that's tough. But when people pay you more dollars, they value your inputs more. And so whatever your market research tells you as the top end, I would never try to compete against, the $10 boot camp. I would never try to compete against the $15, $20 boot camp. I always got to be on the top end of that, because for every, if you do a 35-hour boot or $35 boot camp, you only got to get one person, they got to get three on a regular basis. And so that one person that's going to pay you that dollar amount is going to appreciate and value your input time and all that much, much better than the $10, than the $10 proposition that you might offer. And in this business, yes, you need volume to continue to improve your position, but you also want people that are going to buy into what your program is. So for us, we've always been, I would say, on the higher end, maybe not the highest from our market research, but definitely top third of the pack of people that offer training around where we're at. And then I think, to separate yourself from there, you got to look at what your value proposition is and how how you're implementing technology. Like we don't, when somebody uses our technology, they're not paying directly for that. It's already built into what our pricing scheme is and how we're implementing it. So, all of our clients basically pay for upgrades in technology. And it's just assumed that they're going to utilize that technology as part of their payment structure. And typically, we've used a monthly model, and we earn your business monthly. So we don't have a year round, a 12-month secured contract. We don't have a 6-month. We don't have a 3-month. We do a 1 month, and then if you love it, we earn your business for the next month, and then we earn your business for the following month, and then we continue to move from there. And we do packages. It's just a monthly fee, for how we price it. So I think that covers a lot of that. I also think continuing to try to think outside the box and connect with these people adds value that you don't necessarily talk about. Are you accessible to them when they need you? If they text the business, are they going to get an answer back? Those are value adds that are kind of quiet for them and you, but I think it adds value, and they really appreciate that type of thing. So tools and software. It's interesting because as even before I got involved in Fit, I think we started landing in like 2020 or maybe 2019, something like that. We had used Train Heroic, we had used Trainer Size, we used a number of different applications. Even before that, there was a VBT that had a built-in platform that we utilized, the push band. We won't get into that, but it wasn't a great application for what we and how we wanted to utilize it. But once you start getting above 20 or 30 clients, and I really do think that that's the number, it becomes very hard to manage individualized programming by yourself on a regular basis. Typically on a weekend, I'll take a Sunday, maybe 2-3 hour block, and I'll program, 20, 30 clients on a 3-week rotating basis, maybe 4 weeks if I feel like the program has not achieved what I wanted it to, or if it has achieved, maybe I'd shorten it to 2 weeks, depending on where we're at in the off season. The thing that I like about, some of these applications is they have built-in video and the seamless part of training. If we're in a group environment, our athletes can access their videos to see what's going to happen next on a regular basis. And I think that keeps the program moving as we're going. And from a logistics standpoint, you guys, it's very important when you try to scale something like we have, that the business has to continue to move. And so programs like Fit have really improved that process for us. I don't love having, we deliver all of our programs via phone or mobile in the gym. I don't love having the phone in there, but it really hasn't become a distraction in 5 years for us, where I thought it would be. Sometimes we'll run our team applications off of a tablet attached to a TV in the same capacity to keep the program moving. But that's been a very important part of our process, particularly to individualize these clients. Once we get their assessment, we could have several athletes working on very, very different programs. Now, I'm not saying that, in the hockey population, there are, generally speaking, some exercises, some types of workouts that we want them to do, but not everybody's going to start there. Not everybody can get there, depending on if they're injured or they had, the time of year that they're starting in and where they're at in their skill development, things like that. If they're a baseball player, same deal. So we have to be able to manage all these different starting points for these athletes to try to get them to where we want to get them to. And software like Fit enables that process for us. And I think because of the back end of it being more, we'll call it like an Excel sheet, it makes it easier to kind of make that process where some competitors of it. And again, we do our due diligence when it comes to trying to figure out what's best process for us. They have their own models and things like that, where I think Fit, I ran Excel sheets for 10 years, handwritten, basically handwritten. And this one allows a lot of the process to be automated already, which is a very important part to customizing programs to the depth that our company does it. So I think that's the major message on what's happening within the software and things like that. So um, some last minute advice for getting into something like this. I really, you see a lot of ads and things like that. I don't think there's easy money in a business like this because it's so competitive. I think there's a lot of people that want to do this and they all think it's easy money. And you put out, I could put a free sign on our product and nobody would buy it. What we need to do is we need to create value around what we're doing, and that's what we do as a company. And then people purchase our processes like that. And there's a ton of people. The bar's super low in our industry. Anybody can get into it. I am a perfect example of that. Like, I got into it and I had very little experience, but the difference I think between myself and maybe a lot of people that get into it is I'm relentless on trying to find best practices, and I really want to be somebody that really adds value to clients on a regular basis. And I think my biggest thing, and this is something that I preach to our company and for the last 15, 16 years, be on time. Be on time could be in the capacity of, if you tell somebody that you're going to have an assessment and this is the time that it starts, make sure you start that on time. Or if this is what's going to happen, you actually follow through with it. Because a lot of, when it becomes inconvenient for you as a practitioner, that's when some of these things show through. Oh, 4 o'clock didn't work, something came up. I think there's a lot of that in the world. And I think it's easy to stand out by just doing exactly what you say you're going to do. So that would be my best advice from a business standpoint. I think I'm very good with that process of, I very rarely, I mean, it would have to be, almost something drastic would have to happen for me to miss an appointment on time and things like that. And whether that be with a client or I'm setting up an opportunity with a club or something like that, it doesn't matter. I'm going to be there and do exactly what I say. So I think that would be my best advice for this. And that's pretty much it. I appreciate the time to share some of the experience and how we go about our business at 2SP Sports and the Athlete Lab in Detroit. And that's about it.
Joe, that's awesome. Thank you so much. I mean, the level of experience and expertise that comes together in what you just told us is really amazing. I'm going to move everyone over to be able to unmute themselves. And please go ahead and ask Joe any of your questions. I'll let you guys just jump in. As we're waiting, I would love to just go a little deeper, Joe, on one thing. Obviously, you had mentioned this, and it's a very results-driven industry. I was just curious about, how do you measure the progress of each client? Like, are there regular reports that you send out? Do you sit down and say, hey, this improved this much, etc.? Or is it more that they feel the difference and they know it's working?
So we have I think one of the best parts of my job is I can get direct feedback from skill specific coaches. I can get direct feedback from the athlete. They could say, hey, I feel great on the ice. I don't feel great on the field. My arm wasn't feeling good. This was bothering me, my shoulder, my neck, whatever it might be. So the first thing I'll typically ask people is, how are you feeling out on the sport that you play? And get that feedback. I'll meticulously watch how they're moving during warm-ups. That'll tell me if they're feeling good, if they're feeling bad, if there's an issue. It's pretty easy to spot athletes that don't feel good after after you get to know them for a while. From a feedback loop standpoint, we'll use reports off of our Hawk and Dynamic system. We'll use reports off of data that we've collected on the Smart Speed system that we use. A lot of the stuff that we typically use now has, it will layer in an Excel printout immediately right after we're done. An example would be if we want to do one of the biggest things that we're testing this summer with our hockey clientele is the difference between a self-start 10 with a 3 yard run-in for hockey players and a reactive 10. And we want to close the gap on that. So if we're seeing a better reactive score on a 10-yard dash and we're closing the gap between, let's say on a self-start, we'll do a little bit of a resistance on them because the ice is highly frictioned. So the self-start 10 might be, let's say with a little bit of load, 10, 15 pounds, might be a 1.7, 1.78, and they might do like a 1.99 on a 10-yard. Well, basically we have a smart speed system has a light on the tower, and as soon as it turns green from yellow, they get off on a 10. And what we're trying to do is close the gap on that. And if we see a reduced margin between the two, they know that they're getting faster and that their system is revving up better. That's an easy one. So we're using numbers to basically show them sprint times are going down. And
Mhm.
that's, a heavy feedback for them to understand that they are getting better. Their takeoff velocity is getting better. So we have on Hawk and Dynamic Systems, they have trend lines that, I could show people 5 years of data. The best player they ever were versus what they are, at this current day. Are they ahead of that curve or are they below that curve? On the aging populations, that's an interesting idea because really, if I have a guy that's 31 years old and he was in the prime of his career, we want to kind of maintain that. And if we see a big dip, we know, hey, look, maybe he's not as fast on the ice or he's not as effective, from a physicality standpoint. So there's a lot of data that we draw. Do we have a written report? I think it's different for different people. I'm going to have written reports for people that want that type of stuff. And then sometimes like there's a lot of guys that don't like that for us too. So it just depends on the athlete.
Do you have to also kind of keep the parents in the loop for the youth athletes and hey, your money is being well spent kind of thing?
Yeah, typically I would say that like the youth athletes parents are interesting. Um, from their standpoint, there's typically two types. There's one that's like, all right, he's either getting better or she's getting better, or there's one that's like super involved, that's overly involved. Those are interesting scenarios in themselves. Typically, I like to try to keep as high communication with the parent as possible because at the end of the day, they're the actual purchaser. So they might actually know more about, John than John knows about John in our model. And that's something too, it's hard. Once you start to scale your business and you get a lot more clientele, it's hard to like spend your time doing that because you're spending a lot of your time training, but then you're also got to still communicate with the people that are actually purchasing it.
Hmm. Yeah, seems like a lot to balance. I took a ton of notes, so I've got several questions, but if anyone else wants to jump in, please go right ahead. Um, another question for you, Joe. I was just curious about how you select a location, how you think about a weight room layout, and how you choose the equipment that goes in there.
So all of our gyms have basically the same equipment. We look for if we're building a space, typically we'll look for a place that um, is 3 to 6,000 square feet. We're going to want between 3 and 6 racks. I would say, I'm sorry, 3 or 6 racks for our clients. We work in groups of three basically. So in that type of model, we can get the most volume in and still have the most appropriate equipment to athlete ratio. Um, we'll typically start with like team training because it becomes a good filter for individualized training. So like for every team that we get in, we usually anticipate that we'll get 2 to 3 athletes off of let's say a 20-man team into there. So then we can start to build we'll call it our semi-private model within that. Um, and with the location, I mean, we typically are targeting places that have disposable income. We're not
Mm.
Obviously, I don't think it's a to build a gym and have a four-walled building like it's difficult to pay for if you don't have the right demographic to fund that. Um, and if you want to have new gear, I mean, I started out of a garage. Like I didn't have any money, like, for many years. Like my first gym was a garage sale bought gym. I had a trailer, like, trust me, like I
Mhm.
don't have the money when it comes to that. So it's one of those things that I think people, they look at our gyms now and they go, wow, like how much money did you get for funding? Like none, zero. Like I literally jumped from, you
Wow.
know, 1,700 square feet to 2,300. I made some good moves from the time that I started to the time, and I just have kept building it, and we've gotten good people, and I think now we're in a space like that. But we want people that, you want high traffic sports too. We typically focus on club sports. A lot of people ask why we don't do a ton of football. There's not a ton of money in football, not, and I'm not even saying there's a ton of money in the stuff that we do, but the football teams are usually commanded by their schools, right? So they keep the football team in, they dominate the weight room. So you need club sports that are going to go out and seek outside help from there because they can't get the ideal times that they want right after school, So we really like baseball, softball, hockey. Hockey, you'll find Landon, like a lot of our centers are across the street from like ice arenas.
Got it. Got it. Wow. Yeah, you've solved so many problems, doing everything right.
I don't know if I've done everything right. Trust me, I've done a lot of things wrong, but I seem to be very reactive. And if we make a mistake, you know,
Piv-
you
Pivot
fix it.
quickly. Yeah, yeah. Are there any adjacent services that you offer to your clients, like nutrition or a chiropractor or anything else kind of like that that you've brought in?
We we we've it's tough because we've tried doing some physical therapy work, not our company, but partnering directly with that. And what we found is that it really limits um, our scope of like being able to work with everybody. So our business is purely in strength and conditioning. We don't have any outside medical help. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't work. We work with a ton of people from that application. So we tend to be the end of the referral system for a lot of physical therapies that are post PT looking for return to play. We tend to be a spot for some uh, doctors that will send their throwers to us before they even send them to PT to see if there's some movement biomechanical deficiencies that need to be kind of sorted out. Um, and I think with the chiropractors and stuff like that, like we will use our network of referral system to send out people to those type of places, or not even places. More so, we typically like the single entity, somebody that they can call up and either get an in-home, or so they have to go to like the one room store that they have, because those people tend to really know what they're doing. And they work on their own schedule, and we have accessibility to them. We don't typically work through large chains and things like that, franchise systems through around us.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Um, let's see. You had talked about pricing, and it seems like that would have that's always a tough thing in a business. Did you have some trial and errors with that you could
Oh,
share with us?
yeah, I mean, we've tested a bunch of different models. I mean, I think it's important to try to test what models you like. Now, the one thing that we've always done is, if anything, we've charged more and then we can back off of charging more. So let's say, the product was, 550 bucks a month, right? If we set the bar or the benchmark anchor high, then somebody that we give a reduction to mentally thinks that that's we're improving their situation. So it's much harder to go, well, I'm charging 150 and everybody loves it, and now I want to go to kind of like I hate to say it, but like kind of like the CrossFit model, right? So CrossFit had a great approach to, most centers around us were about 150, 160 a month, right? All you can train. And so like we kind of like when we were first starting out, we were kind of looking at that model and going, man, monthly, it's really hard to ask, somebody for 85 bucks a date when they come in one-on-one and then they cancel and this person cancels, things like that. So we went to this monthly model and created more of a flexible system. And we have windows of time people can come in instead of 1 hour on a Tuesday that they don't have as much flexibility for. um, and so personally I think personal training is kind of a dead thing, particularly in the industry, because people need flexibility on their time now, and that's a challenge. So we've tested, low rates. Honestly, the worst our business ever was when we started going to more of a, we'll call it an economical, approach to our pricing schemes. And it was a disaster. We're like, okay, if these teams come to us, we can offer, lower rate. And it just didn't, we weren't seeing the buy-in. It was easy, when somebody comes in at a lower rate and they're like, hey, I'm going to cancel today, I'm not going to come in. And then, for the same price that, they could buy a Starbucks coffee, it's just too low and they can just throw it out. So why be there? So that, we've tested that too. And it was, honestly, I thought it was the biggest mess up of our financial system, in the business about 7 years ago.
Oh man. Yeah. Um, what are your kind of well, I was going to ask what three or four uh of the most influential books that you've read, both kind of on the business side or on the training side?
Um, Uh, business side, start with no. I thought that was a spectacular book about negotiating. Everything is a negotiation, even from the standpoint of me working with a client. Okay, I have to negotiate what I can get them to do. And that's Start with No is a spectacular book. As far as training, man, like I could give you historical books, super training. I could give you newer books, the 108 performance book that was put out a couple of years ago on rotationally based and the ability to high velocity rotations. I mean, um, to me, when I'm looking at a book, I'm not looking for a book to open up my eyes to a world of training. I'm looking at a book to see somebody's perspective. So whether that perspective is right, wrong, or indifferent doesn't matter. I want to know why they're trying um, to think of how they apply training or the psychology of training. Um, why they're doing it, and whether I agree or disagree, at least I can see that argument. And it's always funny when I run into somebody that I meet and they're telling me about their thoughts, and I'm like, yeah, you read that in a book. Yeah,
Mm.
and they're like regurgitating some things that are directly out of books that I've read. I mean, to me, you can't read enough. In the whole thing. Vergessense's work has always been a favorite of mine from a plyometric standpoint. Um, and Cressy puts out good stuff. I mean, there's a lot of ebooks that are out there that are super accessible. There's endless amounts, but I think what's more important than just the book itself is like why you're reading it. Um, so there was the fascial system that just came out a while ago was a great book to read, and just thinking about like why people think it's always a muscular system or a system problem is an interesting perspective. And really it's more on the fascial lines that people create. Thomas Myers works are always been good. They're boring, but that's what it is, so you gotta deal with the monotony of some of the books that you're going to read also.
Right, right. What about websites or podcasts?
Um, let's see. So I'm not too much into websites. I do quite a bit. What was the website, or what was that one I was on? Um, Podcasts. Um, I like, where's my phone? I got a bunch of them. I don't always remember what they're, I listen to a lot of ebooks or a lot of like Audible books too.
Mhm.
Science for Sports, great. I think we've I can name a couple off here. Let's see. Um, yeah, endless amounts. I mean, I just like pick one in the morning, so I don't even listen to music too much. I'm more so in the realm of podcasts and or ebooks.
Mhm.
So other, Pacey Performance is always been he's I think he's got like 700 or 800 podcasts that have been out there. Science for Sports, physical preparation uh, is has been a good one. Um, but I used to listen to a lot of Mike Boyle. Um, I've had a lot of the Anthony Donskoff. He's a hockey guy. He does the high performance hockey series. I think that one's great. Um, so there's a ton of different options out there for young coaches and coaches that are always constantly looking for new information.
Yeah, yeah. Excellent. And then kind of last question would be what are what's kind of the next thing that the next concept that you've been studying that you want to implement in your practice?
So I am really looking at um, this water bag uh, situation for warm-ups. I really like the Bulgarian water bag. So that's the
Okay.
round shaped one, looks like a moon.
Mhm.
We want to utilize it within our warm-up schemes as opposed to just a improver in rotation. I think that the water bag system is something that's really, really interesting to me. And it's not something like you see it and you just apply it. I mean, we do utilize it, but really dive in on how that could be utilized for our skaters and our throwers pre event, we'll call it,
Mm.
or practice, things like that. That's where I think, but that comes back to what we were talking about, the accessibility to an apparatus that you need prior to that. I mean, you can look at Paul Scanes and how he's using a water bag on his backpack that probably costs, $400 or $500 to do, but not every young athlete's going to have that accessible to them. So how can we do a version of that that is going to be accessible? Somebody can carry it, take it to the field. The Jaeger band for baseball was a big implementation about 15 years ago, right? Everybody's got a Jaeger bag, but once you get past this stretchable device that's collapsible, like how can we implement some of these other apparatuses that are a little bit more bulky that you got to carry around, things like that are maybe majorly impactful for an athlete, but how can you make them accessible prior to the game? So that's one thing that we've been working on. I think the other thing that's really interesting is a grip strength device that we've been kind of testing. Um, and it looks kind of like a claw, and we're using finger pressure to develop basically pronation strength for throwers.
Hmm.
So the Flex Pro, I think it's called, looks like a big device. You put it on your forearm, and it's supposed to improve uh, your fatigue, your fatigue resilience to basically the wrist going into flexion, and then also, um, from a performance metric standpoint, improve rotations and on the baseball, which is going to create a better vertical break, and some things that are more in the data collection realm for those type of players.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Joe, we're at the top of the hour, so we'll let you go. I know you were super busy. I really appreciate you and Natalie putting all the prep time into putting this together. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us.
Got it. Thank you for having us, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. Take care.